In the world, the wars will define me. I belong to you. I belong to you. Who you call me out of darkness, silence every lie. In the world, the voice will define me. I belong to you. I belong to you. You know the enemy can't take what I am, change who I am. I belong to you. You know the enemy can't take what I am, change who I am. I belong to you. By your blood I've been adopted, taking on your name, and I need to be reminded that I've been.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Journey North. We are so excited you can join us whether in person or online. If it's your first time with us today, we consider you a VIP. Make sure you stop by the VIP table in the lobby so you can meet the pastor and let us give you a special welcome gift. If you head to thejourneynorth.com or the TJN app, you can learn more about us, let us know who we could be praying for you, and also let us know that you joined us today. We just want to say thank you for your generosity in being able to help us continue our mission as a church. If you're feeling led to give today, you can do so by going to thejourneynorth.com, TJN app, or dropping your donation off in the box in the lobby. If you're looking for the best way to support us, you can do so by setting up a recurring gift online. However you choose to give, thank you.
Hey Journey North, you know one of the best ways to connect with the church and one another is through a small group. We currently have a number of groups that are meeting at both our Aiken and Baxter campuses, in homes, and even online through Zoom technology. I'm looking for some new small group leaders, and I would love to hear from you if you have an interest in leading a small group as we move through these next few months. If you're interested, and if you're a member of the Journey North, here's what you need to do. You need to go to the website and click on the button for Connect. Underneath that, you're going to see another button that's labeled Lead a Small Group. If you could take just a minute or two to go to that spot, fill out some information, I'll reach back out to you and we'll talk about how we can add you as a small group leader and engage with one another in a whole new way at the church.
If you're looking for a way to stretch your grocery budget, you can join us at Ruby's Pantry. And we're always looking for volunteers. If you would like to serve, let us know. There are many great ways to get plugged in, including joining one of our many volunteer teams. Another great way is to join our daily Bible study online at 7 a.m. You can do so by going to thejourneynorth.com. And if you aren't able to join us that early, you can sign up to get those emailed to you. We'd like to invite you to join us in a time of singing. We hope you enjoy the service.
Will you guys stand with us as we worship?
People come together, strangers, neighbors, our blood is one. Children, generations of every nation, of kingdom come. Dawn
your heart beat. Trouble. Hold your head up high. Don't fear no evil. Just fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong, and remember where our help comes from. Sing it out. Whoa. Sing this out together. Swing wide, all you heavens. Let the praise go up. Let the walls come down. Swing wide, all you heavens. Let the praise go up and the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All his children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. With Jesus, swing wide, all you heavens. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All his children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. On creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All his children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Jesus, our redemption. Our salvation is in his blood. Let's sing that out. Jesus. Jesus, the light of heaven, friend forever, his kingdom come. Well, amen. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here today. Welcome to the Journey North, and thank you for taking time out of your weekend to spend it with us, to be with us, worship with us, and spend some time with us. My name's Josh. If you don't know me, I'm the worship pastor here at the Journey North. Super privileged and excited to have my wife, Andrea, here with me this weekend, which doesn't happen very often. And I got Rick on bass and Jeremy on drums, so give them a hand, too. Woo! Introduce the band. Gotta love it. Well, we're glad you guys are here. We're going to continue to worship, and today we're going to do couple different things. This next song we sing is a little bit of it's an old song, but a new song for us. And we're going to share a special song with you later on as well. So I want you to just kind of soak it in. But right now, as we worship, I just want us to be reminded of why we're singing. We're singing because we're seeking God, because we're praising Him for His goodness. And we're also reminding ourselves and reminding each other when we do this of His goodness and of His promises that never fail and of His nearness to us and His longing to be near to us. And we invite Him into this place and how much we need Him as well is another thing that we're reminding each other. So that's kind of what this song's about. And as we sing, my hope is that you're reminded that in every circumstance, in every situation, you can seek God and you will find Him. Let's sing this together. Lord, I find you in the seeking. Lord, I find you in the doubt. And to know you is to love you, and to know so little else I need you. Here we go. Oh, how I need you. Oh, how I need you. Oh, how I need you. All right, let's pick it up a little bit.
Bones are about to would pour your spirit out. You said that you would fall on sons and daughters. Yeah.
We're going to sing that verse again. You guys sing it with us. I feel it in my bones. Let's invite him into this place.
I feel it in my bones you're about to move. I feel it in the wind you're about to ride in. You said that you would pour your spirit out. You said that you would fall on sons and daughters. So let the rain come drench us in love, and let your glory rush in like a flood. 'Cause we are fixed on this one thing, to know your goodness, see your glory. Yeah, we're transformed by this one thing, to know your presence, see your beauty.
I can see it.
I can see it now, your kingdom come. I can hear it now, the sounds of heaven. You said that if we ask, we'll receive. So we are asking for the greater measure. So let the rain come drench us in love, and let your power rush in like a flood. 'Cause we are fixed on this one thing, to know your goodness, see your glory. Yeah, we're transformed by this one thing, to know your presence, see your beauty. So come and flow on through, Spirit move. We're ready for you. So come and blow on through, yeah. Come and do what only you can do. Come and blow on through, yeah. Spirit move. We're ready for you. Come and blow on through. Come and do what only you can do. 'Cause we are fixed on this one thing, to know your goodness, see your glory. Yes, we're transformed by this one thing, to know your presence, see your
Let's sing that one more time. We are fixed.
yeah, we are fixed on this one thing, to know your goodness, see your glory. Yes, we're transformed by this one thing, to know your presence, see your beauty.
Sing this song. We're going to sing He is Good. We'll sing it together. Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is mine. You are good. 'Cause you are good. Good. Oh, you are good. Good. Oh, yes, you are good. Good. You are good. Good. With the King of my heart, be the wind inside my sails, an anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. The King of my heart, be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. 'Cause he is my song. 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, let's sing it to him. 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, you are good. Oh, let's sing this promise out together. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. Oh, I believe you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. Sing it out. You're never gonna let me down. 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 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Yeah, you are good, you are good. Oh, you never let me down. You're never gonna let me down. Sing that out. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You are good. Sing that out with us. Come on. Let's all sing it. You're good. You're good. Yes, you are good. Good. You are good. God, we just thank you for the truth in these words that you are always good. We ask that you will help us be reminded that you have our best interest in mind. You love us so much. You're good, and you never leave us or forsake us. So help us to open our hearts to you today so that we can experience that goodness that you want for us. Help us to remember that you want us to draw near to you, and help us to do that together and unite us together in your name. In Jesus' name, amen. You guys can have a seat.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the Journey North, and welcome to those of you that are joining us online. We're so glad to have you with us today as we launch into a new series, as you can see by the screens, what we've got going on. Last week, if you were with us, we'd finished up a series on prayer. We spent 21 days in prayer and learning a lot about different aspects of prayer. Last week, we talked about knowing God. And as we were involved in that study, we spent some time and learned about how we can know God better, and in knowing God better allows us to pray really what amounts to better prayers. As you can see, the subject is overcomer. And what does it mean to be an overcomer? I didn't notice this when we first put the slide up, and you probably can't see it, but right here there's a little person standing on top of this mountain. Have any of you ever had a mountaintop experience before where you conquered something? Maybe it was a fear, or maybe it was literally a mountain that you had spent some time working to find your way up to the top. It's a wonderful feeling to be on top, right? But along the way, we encounter obstacles. And what we want to do in this series is talk about some of those obstacles that we face in that journey to being an overcomer. And today we're going to look at one that I think may be common to a number of people. It certainly is an issue that I struggle with. I'll get back to that in a moment, but before I begin, I should really introduce myself. I'm Todd Liscio. I'm the executive pastor here at the church. So glad that you could join us. I also want to give you just a couple of reminders that if you have the TJN app on your phone, it's a great way to take notes and keep track of things. If you don't have the app, I would encourage you to get it. Also, if you're new here for the first time, we'd love to meet you after the service. We've got a VIP table out in the lobby, and if you'd be willing to take some time just to come and say hi, I would love to greet you and get to know you just a little bit. And so we invite you to participate in those things as well. Last week, what I did is I spent some time in what I would call sort of a teaching mode, because I felt like there were some different key points that we wanted to bring out, kind of a to-do list almost when it comes to really knowing and understanding God. Today I'm going to maybe take a little different approach, because what I'd rather do instead with this particular topic is I want to hopefully be a voice of encouragement. Less instruction, but more about encouraging. I want to talk about an obstacle, and I mentioned earlier, it's one that for me is really, it's a real problem for me, and I'm just going to be real transparent about that. But I think it's one that some of you share. When we have obstacles in our lives, sometimes they are obstacles that come at us from the outside, and some of them are self-imposed obstacles. And the one that I want to share with you today is really what I feel is a self-imposed obstacle to help me get to that place of overcoming. You see, for me, I have a nasty habit of comparing. I compare myself to other men in a whole lot of different ways. Let me give you a few examples. I golf. I love to golf. I love to be on the course with my friends, and I am not very good. So I think of guys like Tiger, and I think of guys like Phil and all these professionals, and I think, I wish I could golf like Phil Mickelson. Then I'd have something, right? Some of you may know that I'm a musician. I play guitar. And I look at guys like Keith Urban and Brad Paisley, Eddie Van Halen, and I think to myself, I wish I could play guitar like those guys. So I begin to compare in that regard. I don't know if any of you ever compare. Maybe I'm talking to myself today. I don't know. If any of you have had this experience of comparing yourself to one another. Here's another one. I am 5'9". Do you know what my driver's license says? 5'9.5". Because 5'9.5" is a lot closer to 5'10" than 5'9" ever would be, right? Any of you fudge on your driver's license at all? I really want to be 6'1". Right? Yeah. And part of the reason that I'd like to be 6'1" is that at my current weight, it would fit a whole lot better in a 6'1" frame than it would. I told my wife, I said, it's not that I'm overweight, I'm just under tall. And so if I was just a little bit taller, things would work a whole lot better. I think of guys like Tim McGraw and George Clooney and Harrison Ford and Sean Connery, and I think, if I only looked like them. In fact, my wife says, if you only look like Tim McGraw, Sean Connery, well, you get it. At any rate, what happens is I end up comparing my looks, I compare my abilities, I compare my possessions, and I compare my income. And even at my age now, I look back 40 years ago to a 19-year-old body, and I wish I had my 19-year-old body back. For those of you who are doing the math, that makes me 59. But you see, we compare, and I know for me in particular, I compare very often. And you know what? It's just not God-honoring. And what I hope to accomplish today as we have this time to visit is I want to share some thoughts on why this issue of comparing can be so damaging, why it can create confusion, and why it's a problem. And to begin the discussion, I'm actually going to take you back in history, back into the Bible, to a place where I don't know if this is where comparing began, but it was a point in the Bible that I found maybe entertaining, because sometimes in the Word, there are some things that get put there, and I'm not really sure why, because I don't know that they really have anything to do with the story, so to speak. But I wonder if this isn't part of this whole idea of comparing, where it might have come from. It's in John chapter 20. And this is in John chapter 20, verse 2. And it starts out with this. It says, "So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved." Hold on to that thought. The one Jesus loved, as if he didn't love the other disciples, right? They've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. Now, at this point in time, what's happened, as you maybe are aware, the women had gone to the tomb. The stone was rolled away. Jesus wasn't there. They ran to where the men were, and they shared the news with Peter and John and the others. And so now we're at the point where Peter and the other disciple started toward the tomb. Now, the other disciple we believe is to be John, the author of what we're reading right now. In John 20, verse 4, both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and got to the tomb first. Ever wonder why that's even important? But remember, the guy that wrote it is the guy that got there first. Looking at further in verse 5, he bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Verse 6, then Simon Peter came along, probably breathing heavily, came up behind him. And the great thing about Peter, Peter went right into the tomb. He didn't wait. So he was going to get in there first because John was standing on the outside. So he saw the strips of linen lying there. Verse 7 says that as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head, the cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. In verse 8, finally the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside, and he saw and believed. And again, it's just an entertaining thing to me because, of course, the real concept of that story is the fact that Jesus was risen. But woven into that is this little ditty about who cares who got there first? Who cares who went in there first? But I wonder about this idea of comparing, right? I mean, John supposedly gets there first. Peter goes into the tomb first, but John wanted to make sure that he pointed it out. Again, I don't know why it mattered, but it certainly fits with what we're talking about today. You see, it's so easy, I think, for us to compare to others. But is it good? You know, God created us to be unique and different. Imagine this for a minute. I was talking earlier about guys like Tim McGraw as an example, physical specimen. God could have made every single male in this room and every single male throughout eternity could have been just like him. He's God. He could have said, this is a man, and this is what a man is going to look like. He could have taken Eve and made her the thing that all women were going to be like, right? I mean, couldn't he have done that? He could have made carbon copies for all eternity, but he didn't. And why do you suppose he wouldn't do that? You see, because I believe that he intended for each one of us to be unique, to be different. And I think that we really have to overcome this desire to compare ourselves to one another. Because if God wanted us all to be the same, he would have made us all the same, right? Again, he's God. He could have done it. But he didn't, and he didn't on purpose. There's two key points that I want to unpack today with the time that we have that I think will help in this issue of comparison. And the first one that I want to share with you is this. And I believe this is really important. And it says this, where comparison begins, contentment ends. Let me have that soak in for just a minute. Where comparison begins, contentment ends. Because as soon as I start looking around, then I start questioning, where's my place? So you see, when I begin to compare, there are certain things that can come along after that. If I begin to compare, the next step is I begin to judge. I can begin to judge other people, or I can begin to judge myself in light of them. I also place value. And I want you to remember that word because I'm going to come back to it a little bit later on. I place value and worth onto others, and then I compare myself to the value that I place on them. And then the next thing I do is I want to see where I measure up. And so if you go back to some of my earlier examples, I am not going to measure up to any of those people probably in light of the characteristics that I was talking about, whether it's athletic ability, whether it's musical ability. I will not measure up no matter what I do. In the Bible, there are verses that I think address this very clearly, and Paul addresses this in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and in verse 12. Paul is admonishing people now, and here's what he's doing. He's instructing them by saying this. He says, we do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. And if I stop right there, what he's saying is don't be comparing yourself to these people who maybe think more of themselves than they ought to. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they're not wise. It is unwise for us to do that. Now, in an earlier verse, I just want to read it to you real quick. There's a verse in the same chapter, in verse 7, that I think speaks to this very, very clearly. Now, there's a danger to take and just pull one verse out of the Bible, all right? But in this case, I think that it fits really well, because listen to what Paul says. With all of this going on that we mentioned, verse 7 says, you are looking only on the surface of things. And I wonder how often you and I find ourselves in that situation. I can't speak for you, but I can speak for me. So often, when I find myself in comparison mode, I am comparing to things that rely on the surface. So they just lie on the surface. Paul is urging us not to compare or classify ourselves. You see, if you look around our world today, there is many opportunities for us to look at things on a surface level, right? And you look at social media. You look at what's happening in the news. You look at magazines, and so much of what we see today, we have been bombarded with external surface things that somehow we're supposed to put some value on. And when you think about that, why is it a problem? And if we go back to that first statement that I made, that when we compare, it begins to bring about discontent. Because when I perceive someone in that way, if I look at them differently than how I see myself, I begin to look at my shortcomings. And let me talk about what that leads to, because if I believe that I have those kind of shortcomings, if I don't measure up, then that discontent is what begins to surface. And discontent is a dangerous place to be. I want you to think about some of the results of being discontent. It can lead to all kinds of bad decisions. It can lead to chemical use, chemical addiction. It can lead to poor decisions with our money. It can lead to poor decisions with relationships. If we continue down the path, it can lead to self-loathing, self-pity, and it can even lead to jealousy. And all of those things come about because I somehow feel that I don't measure up in the way that I should. I love what the Apostle Paul has to say, though, because I think he does have some insights for us and something that we really can use. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 12, Paul says this, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. And if I stop just there for a moment, you see, there was a point in Paul's life when he was actually quite wealthy. He was a leader in the community, and he kind of had it all. All right, he was well respected, and again, money was not a problem for him. And if you follow through Paul's story, he spends a lot of time in prison. And so here's a man who has said, I've been on the mountaintop, I've had it good, and I haven't had it so good. And I have learned how to be content. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And so I have to wonder, what do you suppose that key to that contentment is? What did Paul discover that would allow him to feel a sense of contentment regardless of what his circumstances were? I think back to times when I've maybe shared before, I've been on missions trips to Honduras. And if you've never been to a third world country, it's quite an eye-opening experience. But one of the eye-opening pieces is this. There are people in these bad, dire situations that have such joy and have such peace in the midst of nothing. I was reminded of one of the trips that we took a couple of years ago. It was in the evening, and we had some extra money, and so the team bought a bunch of food. And we went out to the surrounding area to really the poorest of the poor, and we brought them food. And they were so incredibly grateful. The joy that they had is something as simple as bringing a couple of bags of food. And one of the homes really stuck out for me because we had gone to a place, and it was around supper time. Went to a home that actually had a couple of families. There were 2 women there with a number of children. And Elmore, the pastor who was our interpreter and guide on the trip, took us to this home. And as he was showing us around a little bit, he pointed out something very important. He said, I want you to see this. It's dinner time in Honduras. And when they cook, they normally cook outside their homes, so they've got an open fire and the big kettles and things like that. And he said, I want you to see something. And he took us to the place where they should be having a fire, and he said, you'll notice that there's no fire. It's supper time. Everybody's got a fire right now. They're cooking their food. He said, the reason they have no fire is they have no food. And we showed up with food. And it was a wonderful thing. But the joy that these people have in the midst of nothing, and I'm continually reminded about that fact that if my joy is placed in physical things or surface things, as Paul pointed out earlier, I'm going to struggle to maintain a sense of joy and contentment. And again, if you think about Paul, he had a lot, he had the good food, he had everything, and then he had nothing. How do you balance that out? You balance it out in part by not letting that be where your joy sits. If we go back to Philippians 4, verse 13, here's part of the key for Paul. He said, I can be content in all of these things because of this. I can do all of this through him who gives me strength. If I'm on top of the mountain, I can be joyful and I can appreciate the fact that I can do that because of his strength. If I'm down in the depths, I can do the same thing because I can do these things through Christ is where I find my strength. That was a key for Paul, and that has to be a key for us as well. There's a second side to this comparing thing, though, that I think is equally and maybe even uglier. I don't know. Because on the one hand, as I mentioned earlier, if I compare myself to others, there's a tendency for me to put myself down, to devalue myself. But the second side of this is a mindset that actually can take and elevate my worth and decrease the worth of someone else. So the second point that I want to share with you is this today. Comparing makes you feel either superior or inferior. And you know what? Neither one of those honors God. We already looked at how it looks like if I compare myself up to others. But think for just a moment about the flip side of this. What happens when we compare ourselves to others to make us feel superior? Have you ever found yourself in that situation before? I think about the times that I have, and I'm really ashamed of the fact when I look around and I decide that I'm better at something than someone else, or I'm simply a better person than they are. At least I'm not doing what they're doing. The Bible talks about that too. But you know, we have to be so careful about elevating ourselves in light of other people. Because again, where is it that I'm going to be placing my worth? Where am I going to be placing my trust? Jesus gave us an important word. I'm just going to read it to you real quickly here. In Matthew chapter 7, let me tell you what Jesus said about this. We heard about what Paul had to say. Jesus says this in Matthew 7, verse 1. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. And I love that because you know what? I'm guilty. I'm guilty of judging. I am guilty of putting other people down. And you know, sometimes what I forget? There's probably someone watching me too, and they're probably judging me too. And sometimes we can be just a little bit too concerned about what's going on with others. Let me give an example. I remember years ago when I was a school counselor at a junior high, 1,100 8th and 9th graders. Imagine what that was like. So kids would get in trouble. Sometimes they'd be sent to me, sometimes they'd be sent to the assistant principal, and sometimes we would end up working together with students. And Dale, his name was the assistant principal at the time, I loved spending time with Dale because he had such a homespun wisdom about him. It was really, really kind of fun, and sometimes he would sort of mess with the kids when he was talking to them even. But there was a point that I remember we had some kids in the office, and they were in trouble, you know, kind of red-handed, they were caught and all that. And, of course, as Dale starts to confront the kid, and maybe you've seen this happen with your own kids, really quickly the kid is responding by saying, yeah, but what about? What are you going to do about, hey, you know, they start this comparison thing, and Dale gave a great answer that really kind of stopped the kids in the tracks. What you'd oftentimes say is, you know what? Watch your own bobber. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but Dale was the one that I heard that from for the first time. Watch your own bobber. Pay attention to yourself, and don't worry about what other people are doing, right? Jesus actually had his version of watch your own bobber. And in John chapter 21, and I'm going to start with verse 20 here. We're back to Peter and the disciple that Jesus loved. Peter turned and saw that the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. They were walking down the road, and as they're talking, in parentheses it says this. Again, this was the one that Jesus loved. Again, because Jesus didn't love any of the other ones, there was only one disciple that he loved. This was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and had said, Lord, who is going to betray you? Jesus goes on. When Peter saw him, he asked, Lord, what about him? And I love Jesus' response because Jesus answered, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me. You know, so Peter again was concerned about what was going to happen with John. Maybe, sincerely, I don't know. But Jesus responded to him in that same manner by saying, don't worry about him. Because listen, pal, you got trouble of your own coming. You're going to be forced to make some decisions here, and you're going to have to be accountable for yourself. So don't worry about him. Just take care of yourself. I love that. But what do we do with all of this information? What do we do about this idea of comparing? I've already told you it's not good. It devalues me and others who are created in God's image. But what is the antidote? And how do we correct it? I think it starts by answering this question right here. Who or what is going to define my worth? Let that sink in for just a minute. Who are you going to let define what you are worth? For me, if I'm not careful, I'm going to let Tim McGraw define my worth. I'm going to let Tiger Woods define my worth, or any of these other guys. If I'm not careful, that's what I'm going to do. Because I'm going back to comparing and measuring up, and I don't, so I must not be worth very much, right? Who is going to define, or what is going to define my worth? The answer, I think, to that question, or at least one of the answers, might be found in the book of Hebrews. I think that in Hebrews 12, verses 1 and 2, we actually get a fairly clear directive on this. Let's take a look. In Hebrews 12, verse 1, it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. I love that image. If you think of burdens that we're carrying, the difficulties in life, and it's weighing us down, and he's saying, you know what? Throw it all off. Get rid of it. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. It's one of my favorite verses. Throw it off, and let's move forward. And this next part, I think, is critical. These first few words, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. If you don't remember any other verse from this message today, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Because you see, for me, for too many years, I've compared, as I mentioned earlier, I've compared other people's money or how much money I have or don't have. I've compared other people's talents and abilities. I've compared other people's possessions. And I really feel like I need to be more like Paul and less like the way I've been. Part of that is realizing the things that I can control and the things that I can't. And I need to learn to accept some of those things that I can't change. I love what it says in the Serenity Prayer. Some of you may be familiar with this. Alcoholics Anonymous has their Serenity Prayer that I think has significant application right here and right now. Because it says this, it says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. I can't change my height. And I can wear lifts in my shoes or whatever, but I'm limited with what I can do. I cannot change my height. I have to accept the fact that I'm 5'9". And I'm probably going to get shorter. I'm not going to get taller as I age. God, grant me the serenity to accept what I can't change. The second part says, and the courage to change the things I can. I'll never play golf like Tiger Woods, but I could get better. I could take lessons. I could practice more. I'm never going to play guitar like some of these other guys, but I could get better because those are some things that I can control if I practice. I can envy other people's money, or I can start saving my own. So those places that we compare, accept what I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and here's the key, the third point, the wisdom to know the difference. Because I can spend a whole lot of time fretting about things that I can't change and just accepting some of the things that I probably could and maybe should. And I think what we're called to is really knowing what the difference is between those two things. I need to be reminded of some things, and I want to remind you too. When I compare myself up, to the famous people, to the celebrities, whatever else, I devalue myself. When I compare down, I belittle other people. If I look to the left, I falter, and if I look to the right, I stumble as I'm trying to make my way up that mountain. But if I fix my eyes on Jesus, that's when I succeed. And that's when I become less discontent, and that's when I become more content with where I am because of whom I'm fixing my eyes on. As we close out today, I want to pose a few questions for you to think about maybe throughout the course of the week. Some things that I hope will help you to get your head around a little bit more this issue of comparing. First question that I have is this. Where and how do you compare yourself to others? What if you suddenly had everything you wanted? Would it be enough? And what is one thing that you can change today? Maybe to start moving down that path, removing that stumbling block, because as I said earlier, this is a stumbling block that is self-imposed. At least for me it is. It's one that I actually really have something that I can do something about. A few reminders for you. God made you. God has a plan for you. He made you and He made me distinctly unique. He did it on purpose. You're not an accident. You're not a mistake. You're on purpose. And He does have a plan for you. And when it comes to overcoming things, remember this. You and God are a majority. The two of you together can overcome anything. And the last thing is when we think about this idea of worth. I mentioned earlier, what's going to define your worth? Let me help you a little bit in case you're wondering. What are you and I worth? We are worth God's Son. We are worth the blood of Jesus. That's how much value God placed on you and me, because he sacrificed his Son for us that we can be with him in eternity. If you ever wonder, if you ever doubt your value, hang out in that realm for a little while, because what are you really worth? You are worth the sacrifice of the blood of Jesus. So with that, let me pray. Heavenly Father, it is humbling, and I'm not even sure where to go with that, when I consider the gift that you give to us and the value that you placed on us, regardless of what the world says, regardless of what other people say. The value that you give to us is that you gave your Son. You traded his life for our eternity. Lord, it's a debt that we can never repay other than this, to be grateful and to do our best, Father, to live lives that are pleasing to you. So as we go forward today, as we go out into our lives, Father, I just pray that word of encouragement over each one of us, that we would come to realize our value in you. Thank you for your precious love. Thank you for your Son. Jesus, thank you for your willingness to sacrifice for us. All the glory and honor and praise belong to you. Jesus, it's in your name that I pray. Amen.
Well, we're going to close out with kind of a special song today that I want to share with you, and you guys can remain seated if you want. You can stand if you want during the song. It's up to you, but there's a video behind it that I want you to watch, and this song has just had quite an impact on me throughout my life, and I wanted to share it. But it's a song about finding our worth in Jesus, and it's a reminder that God is constantly taking things that are broken and falling apart and making them beautiful. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. Well, we want to thank you guys so much for being here and joining us today. Thank you guys for tuning in online. We hope you guys were blessed by that and had a blessed day today. We hope to see you next weekend. Have a great week. We love you. God bless.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. Though you have been broken, your innocence stolen, I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. There is no distance that cannot be covered over and over.